today's webinar. We are very excited to talk about Microsoft Licensing Health Check in today's webinar, where we are going to cover a lot of valuable information on how to maximize your investments on E5 licensing, some of the assessment and evaluation techniques, just basically how to get the most out of your E5 licensing or other license type that you may be using in Microsoft 365. So with that, let's get started. Today's agenda is we are going to start with a quick introductions. Then we're going to talk about Microsoft licensing overview, different types of licensing, and then we are going to discuss some very important information about assessing your current environment and some of the planning activities that you can do to maximize your E5 and your Microsoft 365 licensing in general. Then we have a really cool case study to talk about today. Chris and I both were involved in this opportunity, so super excited to talk to you about this case study with you all today. Finally, we're going to talk about some of the key takeaways from this webinar, and then what can we do as an organization to help you through your Microsoft 365 journey. So today I am joined with my colleague Chris here, but a little bit about myself. My name is Satyendra Sharma. I am one of the field CTO focused on digital workplace technologies here at Netrix. I've been with Netrix for almost 8 years now, and I am based out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In digital workplace, we focus on all things collaboration. That includes Microsoft Teams. We have our own UCaaS and CCaaS solutions, meeting spaces, and contact centers, omnichannel contact center. Chris, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Seth. Yeah, and hi everyone. My name is Chris Clark. I'm also a field CTO, but I'm focused on cybersecurity. I've been with Netrix for 8 years now, mostly on the professional delivery side, held multiple roles on the pro services side. Also recently was manager of our Microsoft security team. But my focus here is really on security around zero trust. So looking at identity, devices, threat protection, data security, and even AI now. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. So as you can see, collectively, we are bringing almost 40 years of experience on this webinar. So a lot of good content coming up your way. So the first topic we want to talk about is understanding Microsoft 365 licensing. As we all know, if you are using Microsoft products, sometimes navigating through all these license types and components can be very challenging. So we want to take a little bit of time to talk about what are the different kinds of licensing and what business suits what kind of license. So to break it down in high level categories, we have SMB market, right? Small and medium businesses, which tend to more align with the Microsoft 365 business licensing. Typically, these are organizations that are up to 300 users in size. There are two flavors in Microsoft 365 Business. There is a standard license and there is a premium license, depending upon what component you are really needing for the organization. On top of that, there are some add-on licenses that you can add on top of your core business license. Typically, these are Defender Suite and then the Purview components for enhanced security. And Chris is going to talk a little bit more about it in the future slides. Then we have enterprise companies. So these are companies that are bigger than 300 users and up to unlimited, right? Like there is no top limit. So anything that is more than 300 falls into the enterprise category. This is where we start to see some of those Office 365, E3 license, E5 licenses. These are enterprise licenses for bigger clients. There are other components also involved. So there is a EMS mobility package for additional components, security, device management, so on and so forth. And we are going to talk a little bit more about it in the future slides. But the the message here is that there are business licenses for small medium, there's enterprise licenses for larger organizations. Then we have what we call specialized licenses, and these are more geared towards the use cases or the workforce. So one of the common one that you may have come across is frontline licensing. These are F licenses, right? So there's F3, F1, F5. So different categories, again, for different needs and requirements. There is also Entra ID, Intune standalone licenses. There is Microsoft 365 Copilot, the digital assistants that we are going to touch a little bit more about in the future slides. There is Teams Premium license that attaches on top of your Microsoft Teams standard license, right? And this is the one that adds more secure meeting, branded meeting, advanced capabilities to your whole Teams collaboration experience. We have Teams Room licenses. These are specialized licenses designed for meeting spaces, and there are a couple of flavors in that as well. And then we have Teams Phone. So this is an add-on license that really elevates your Microsoft Teams calling to enterprise-grade phone system, right? So very specialized licenses built for meeting specific requirements of the businesses. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Chris to talk a little bit more about this different licenses type.
Thanks. Yeah, so as Sat was mentioning, there's one of the first starting points is to kind of look at the size of your business, right? If you fall under 300 users, you do have some unique choices around M365 Business Standard or M365 Business Premium. So standard is really kind of the bare bones, small business type of licensing where you need kind of limited base set of features. There's not the device management and security capabilities that you truly need, as an organization. So I would say, we see limited business standard licensing from that perspective. But it is a good starting point, from a conversation standpoint. But Business Premium gets you closer to that enterprise level capabilities with different choices around it, including what's called the new Defender and Purview suites. So recently, Microsoft announced that Business Premium, you're able to add on Defender and Purview suites to get it pretty close up to par to full enterprise E5 licensing. So it adds the Defender stack, which we'll go into a little more detail in the next few slides, and also Microsoft Purview for data security, data governance, etc. So Business Premium and Standard are designed for up to 300 users. That's essentially the threshold of the licensing, right? So that's one of the main kind of barriers to entry, right? If you're looking at that licensing. So if you're over that, you really have to look at the other licenses that are shown below. But we typically still run into Office 365 E3. So Office 365 has been around for a long time. I've been personally working with it since it was called a B+, which is a very long time ago at this point. But Office 365 E3, we're still running into it at clients. That's kind of the base licensing from a productivity standpoint. And you don't have really any security features around that, right, with that base licensing. So usually we'll see organizations that have Office 365 E3 and maybe Entra ID P1, right, from the identity standpoint. But primarily you might have other security tools that we'll talk about how we can consolidate those potentially into the E5 tooling. There's also Office 365 E5, which had some more advanced features around Power BI on the productivity side. But again, it's really focused on productivity versus any security or compliance features. Then Microsoft came out with what was called EMS, or Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite. There are two flavors of that, E3 and E5. E3 is Enter ID Premium P1. Also includes Intune from a device management standpoint, and then Purview Information Protection Plan 1 as well. Now, when we're talking about Purview, one of the key differentiators between P1 and P2 licensing, which will also translate to E5, as we'll see, is that with Purview P1, you essentially have manual labeling capabilities and some base DLP capabilities as well. There's retention and e-discovery, but anything around automation will lead us to the Plan 2 or the E5 features. So when we think about automatic labeling, um, any type of labeling on what's called the client side. So when you're in an Office application and it detects sensitive information and it wants to either recommend or enforce a label for that file, that's considered auto labeling. And then there's also service side, which would be against data at rest in SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive. So that's kind of a simple way to kind of differentiate. There's definitely more details around that, but ultimately you start to look at more automated capabilities, right? Especially around Purview. What EMS C5 gave you was Enter ID Premium P2, which gives you risk-based conditional access, privileged identity management, or PIM. Gives you Defender for Identity, which would be sensors installed on your domain controllers to look for authentications on the domain. Defender for Cloud Apps as well, so Microsoft's CASB capabilities. So you can start to see if you have some of this licensing, depending on what it is, there might be overlap with your current tooling. And that's one of the kind of key topics of today, is to understand how to evaluate that and see if there's areas for consolidation. So what we've most commonly come across, or a lot of these have converted to what's called Microsoft 365. So there's two main flavors of that. There's Microsoft 365 E3, and there's also E5. But then there's add-ons in between that. So there's kind of a mix and match capability here that we can discuss. But Microsoft 365 E3 is essentially Office 365 E3, which we were discussing above there, and EMS E3. But you also can now license Windows 10 or Windows 11 Enterprise. So most organizations should be on 11 with the support ending, but there's extended support that might be on 10 as well. But now you have that as a complete bundle. Whereas M365 E5 is Office 365 E3, EMS E5, also Windows Enterprise as well on the Windows side. But you get the entire Defender XDR stack, which we'll go into detail as well. So lots of choices, but really what you'll see, one of the easiest areas to look is the Office 365 Administrative Center. You'll see what licensing you have, how that kind of matches up with these features, and then we start to determine, how can we see what we're using, what we're not using, is there overlap with other tooling, and that kind of gets us to the next step in the process. So. And if we want to move forward here, there's other specialized suites that Sal was mentioning. So there's frontline workers, where you might have workers that possibly only need a browser or a mobile device versus the full Office software, as a quick example there. Then they might align with frontline workers, maybe shared devices. There's even more unique capabilities within frontline itself and specific SKUs within that. But those align with, you might need different productivity features, but you still want to have kind of blanket security policies potentially, right, depending on the scenario. So there are security and compliance add-ons for these as well. And some newer suites that are available. Entra Suite is above and beyond what's included in E5 capabilities. So you get Entra ID governance for various workflow capabilities. So thinking automation around joiner, mover, leaver scenarios for onboarding, offboarding, etc. You get Entra private access and Entra internet access. So these are the security service edge capabilities that were recently announced from Microsoft. And then verified ID gives you the ability to have different ID types, say a license or a passport, for truly even above MFA capabilities for various scenarios there. So that's the Entra Suite, and then Intune Suite has more advanced Intune features above regular Intune that we saw we get with M365 E3 or M365 E5. You have things like endpoint privilege management, remote assist capabilities, advanced analytics, certificate components and management around that. So very unique use cases that also might augment some of the current tools that you're using where there's overlap potentially. So I'll hand it back to Sat here for some of the digital workplace items here.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. So yeah, too many options, right? And then to continue that options for the digital workplace workload, we have Teams Phone. Now, this Teams Phone is an add-on license on Teams core services, right? So if you have an E3 or E5 that already has Teams included in it, or if you're a newer organizations, now Teams has become a standalone license, right? So now you'll see E3, E5 licenses without any Teams component in it. So you have to get a Teams enterprise license on its own, standalone, that gives you the Teams collaboration capabilities. So be able to do instant messaging, group chat, all the channel conversation, all the different teams, document sharing, co-authoring, the whole collaboration package you get as a standalone license if it is not already part of it. Now, what we are also seeing is that organizations are taking Teams to that next level where it's becoming the enterprise phone systems. So we are working with a lot of clients where they have a legacy phone systems, and we have more slides coming up on that, like different products, but Teams can become your enterprise phone systems, your phone numbers, your company main numbers can route into Teams. It can have its own greeting and business hours and after hours, all kind of automated IVRs to get the calls redirected to the right destination. Including it supports dynamic E911 for emergency calling and notification. There is compliance-based recording stuff that we will talk a little bit more about it. Moving on, so Teams Premium, as I briefly mentioned earlier, is that uplift in the Teams collaboration experience, right? Especially around meetings. So now we can do live translation. Literally, you are in a meeting and you have people joining from international countries. Maybe English is not their native language. They can turn on live translation in real time. It's going to translate the speech that's being spoken on the Teams meeting into their native text on the screen, right? So that's where everybody is included. They're getting the message, and there is no ambiguity in the meeting. We have branding in the Teams meeting now, so you can really make the Teams meeting your personalized corporate branded. The watermarking and the end-to-end encryption is huge. So there is a lot of companies who do have sensitive meetings, right? They are discussing something that's in the development, company proprietary data, anything that is sensitive. And if they are discussing it over a meeting, over a screen sharing, they have their watermark, right, to protect their corporate assets. Likewise, the end-to-end encryption. This being said, I want to be clear, Teams meetings are by default encrypted. Every time you are in a Teams meeting, on the very top left corner, you will see a shield that shows that the meetings are encrypted using Microsoft standard encryption protocols. This E2E end-to-end encryption takes it to a whole different level. It is creating a completely isolated environment for meeting that some of the native components within the Microsoft 365 stack, like even those don't have access, right? So it's really, really isolated for extremely sensitive meetings that client wants to make sure it's very secured and nobody can tap into it. Teams rooms are specialized licenses for meeting spaces. So there are two different categories of Teams room license. There is a standard and a pro license. So any organization that has more than 20 meeting room license, they have to go to the pro license. And pro comes with more managed services, monitoring, automation component in it. But these are very specialized licenses used for rooms, because you don't want to be assigning E5s to your rooms, right? That's not the point. That's where we want to make sure we are careful on the license assignment. Teams Room gives you the full Teams capability. It gives the Exchange Online component. It gives the Entra ID component, so you can really give that room an identity, schedule that room ahead of time through Outlook calendars and invites and things like that. Lastly, Copilot. So as you probably everybody is familiar with Copilot, it is our new AI digital assistants. With the Microsoft 365 Copilot licenses that gets added to all of your office productivity apps, really, really enhancing the end user experience. I mean, I can't even explain how much time, like I'm sure same with Chris, it's been a huge time saver for us, right? Summarizing email, recapping meeting, getting bullet points, just makes us uh, extra productive, right? So huge time savers. And now with the agentic AI and Copilot agents, we can really start taking it to the next level where organizations are making their own AI agents, working off of the corporate data, whatever workflow they want to automate to really increase the productivity and take it to a very next level. So I think that's all the license type we wanted to deep dive. As you see, there is a ton of options, a ton of capabilities, and these are all for a good reasons, right? It does get complicated, but that's where we can help navigate through all the options and make sure we go the right path. So with that, we're going to switch gears and talk about what can you do to understand what type of licensing are being used and what kind of third-party tooling that is already in your organization, kind of doing the same thing that Microsoft 365 licenses will bring to the table. So what can we do? The first and foremost, analyze your licensing and the tools, right? So this is where really we are educating clients to take a step back, see what licenses do you have, and what are the third-party tools in your company doing the same thing. To give a quick example, we have many clients we've talked to, they have E3, E5 licenses, but then they're also paying a third party for email security. Right, this email security components are part of it, E5. And Chris has another slide coming up that really talks about different kind of workload that Microsoft 365 solves for. Similarly, we have talked to many organizations. They are using Zoom because that was a big thing in pandemic. Everybody wanted Zoom. And then now we have a redundant feature where Microsoft Teams, which is already included in your licensing, is a corporate enterprise tool that you already have access to, right? So there is numerous cases that will pop up once you start looking into what licenses you have, what third party you have, and that's gonna take us to the next point is once you have the assessment of your licensing, then you kind of look at your users, your use cases, your personas, right? Like what use cases do we have for information worker? Not all users need the same tools, right? And tools in this sense would be licensing. So if you have a corporate users, that may need different licensing. If you have a frontline users, that users is gonna not need all the things that the corporate users need, right? You have field users, and every organization is different. They have different workforce, different personas. So really you need to kind of like work from the persona up to figure out what is their use cases. And then once you understand that, then you can layer in your corporate security, right? And that's going to kind of start painting the picture on what license really you need or what's going to fit best. Which is really the third point, right? So once you have the assessment done, once you look at the personas, once you look at your corporate security, overall architecture, that's going to start tailoring that solution that you really need. yeah, we have seen a lot of confusion in this area on what feature to use from E5. Do I need E5? Do I need E3? So if you start doing some of this legwork, it's going to clarify a lot of things. And then, of course, we can also help. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chris back to talk about some of the security components.
Thanks. Yeah, and one area from the previous slide about different personas, there's the aspect of the productivity tools, right? Users needing different tools, but potentially when we're looking at security and compliance specifically, you might want to take more of a blanket strategy, right? Otherwise, you might introduce gaps in trying to have different security and compliance tools mapped to other licensing. So that becomes part of the strategy that we can definitely help with, right? But a quick example of that would be around identity. Having baseline conditional access and MFA policies for all users, right? Versus a user just needing a phone or a browser from a frontline perspective. So everything kind of falls into that overall strategy there. But what we commonly do is really look at the current tooling in your environment around what I would call pillars, right, of technology. So this can go across a lot of different areas. Specifically, what's shown here is around security and compliance. So when we say, Microsoft 365 has E5 has Defender XDR in it. Defender XDR is made up of Defender for Office 365, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, Defender for Cloud Apps, and even advanced Entra ID P2 identity features. So that's just on the security side, and then also you have Microsoft Purview E5 features as well. So each one of these, from a more simplistic view, kind of maps to a tooling category, and is a good way to look at it. So if we look at email protection, we commonly run into other third-party tools like Proofpoint, Barracuda, Mimecast, Cisco. And if you already own E5 licensing, or maybe you have the E5 security add-on with Microsoft 365 E5 as another potential option, or if you're just looking at, the security tooling consolidation exercise here and potentially looking at E5, this is a great way to understand where that tool overlap is, right, and where the consolidation points are. So same thing goes for endpoint protection, right? We commonly run into CrowdStrike, Symantec, Trend Micro, Sophos, SentinelOne, and others. Directly translates to Defender for Endpoint capabilities. Each one of these has acronyms that we'll use. As you can see, MDO, MDE, MDI, MDA. Those are represented there by the tools in Defender XDR. So we'll commonly switch between those. To get a little confusing, lots of acronyms in the Microsoft world, but makes it a little bit easier there. So really talking about advanced endpoint protection, EDR capabilities, threat and vulnerability management, you start to see how there's overlap with potentially your current security tooling around endpoint protection. Then we look at identity protection overall. So there's CrowdStrike identity, there's Proofpoint identity, SentinelOne has capabilities, and Defender for Identity, which is one of those components I mentioned in Defender XDR in a previous slide, allows you to look at all authentications on your domain, right, through sensors on your domain controllers. One of the key areas here is that everything I've gone through is considered Defender XDR, and this reports up to the consolidated security portal, right? So one of the key areas here of not only the direct cost takeout of the vendor consolidation, if you have third-party tooling, is looking at things like how would you do incident response across all these tools, right? Is there synergy with the tools with different signals coming from various areas like email protection, endpoint protection, identity, even CASB capabilities? So we start to see one of the main points that we're discussing is the consolidated tools will give you that visibility, that capability for signals to go across those tools quickly in an incident response fashion. And really that's one of the key values here is looking at consolidating. So that goes against kind of what we commonly run across, which is best of breed, right? Having different tools across different vendors, we can see how that creates potentially some problems. So really identifying these pillars and looking through all the various third-party tools, how they can map to the Microsoft side, really becomes part of our strategy here. So kind of continuing on with the cloud access security broker, so things like Zscaler, Palo Alto, or Netscope, we commonly run into. You have Microsoft Defender for cloud apps capabilities. And overall identity, one overlooked area is kind of a IDP or identity provider. So usually with enterprise organizations or whatever the case may be, you might run across ADFS or Okta or Ping or OneLogin. These are identity providers that are federated with Microsoft 365, and you can migrate directly to Entra ID and something like password hash sync. So there's a direct cost takeout there. If it's ADFS, you're getting rid of all the ADFS infrastructure, certificates, networking that goes with it. So you can start to see that TCO example in play there. But then also with Entra ID, you have conditional access. So maybe if you have third-party MFA tooling like Duo or RSA, there's also a cost takeout and migration path component there. And then finally, revolving more around the compliance side and data security, we look at common vendors like Varonis, Symantec, Digital Guardian, and how they translate or migrate with a path to Microsoft Purview. So really, what I do on a daily basis is kind of take this mentality, look at these pillars, understand, what's in an organization's environment, and see how those can map. And it's not to always say that it has to be this path exactly. There might be use cases where it makes sense to have, parallel configurations between tools that we've seen. But more often than not, there is definitely a direct cost takeout scenario that could be uncovered here. So, and then on the digital workplace side, hand it back to you here, Sat. Let's go over those.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Chris. So digital workplace side, right? Like same story. So we've got multiple vendors that we run across, similar redundant capabilities. Just to kind of name a few, right? So when it comes to collaboration, we have a lot of organizations using Slack, Google Workspace, Asana, Dropbox, Notion, Miro, technologies like that. It can all be done in Teams, which is again native in 365, and not just is like part of a Microsoft technology, but it also integrates really well with the rest of the productivity suites, right? Like everybody's using Outlook, email, SharePoint, OneDrive. It ties all of that together, and it follows your corporate security and governance under the same umbrella. So you don't have to go manage different security policies and controls in third-party tools. Likewise, we have from a voice and telephony perspective, Zoom, RingCentral, 8x8, Cisco, Avaya, Mitel, Vonage, all these other phone providers that have an add-on component. Your call detail records are getting stored somewhere. Your call recordings are stored somewhere. It's just getting information segmented where we can put everything in Teams phone system. Your voicemails go into your Outlook. Easy to access. Anywhere people log in to access Microsoft Teams, they have access to their corporate phone system. Meeting perspective, Zoom, WebEx, Google Meet, all these technologies can be replaced with a Teams meeting solutions, right? And there are different policies, different controls. So, and this is where we can really zero in on that persona discussion is going to help out, right? Because not everybody may need Teams Premium, only the executives or only the organizers. So we can help navigate through all those scenarios. Room systems, like I talked about, right? Like dedicated meeting spaces. And then, do we need Pro? Do we need Basics? Those are up for discussions that we can certainly help with. A webinar component, the webinar, town hall, these things have evolved significantly in the Microsoft ecosystem. There is so much you can do with these things, different breakout rooms, branding, registration pages, things like that. Uh, we can replace all that. Introducing not only just technology consolidation, but these things have a very significant impact in terms of expense, right? It can really uh, maximize the value out of your Microsoft licensing by eliminating some of these third-party redundant tools and costs. Some other things, we are starting to see SMS. That's a new thing that's kind of trending quite a bit. You have all these third-party tools right now doing SMS services. We can do all that in Microsoft Teams. Users don't have to go use different tools for SMS and voice calling and things like that. All of that can happen inside of Microsoft Teams. Familiar interface, easy user adoption as well. Meetings, oh, that's redundant. Anyway, AI, right? So Microsoft Copilot, again, it talks across all the productivity, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. It is doing a ton of heavy lifting. I mean, you can, and we are also helping clients with like some of the prompt engineering, things like that, just to make sure we are using this tool to its maximum capability, right? So you can eliminate all these third-party AI tools. This is where data gets kind of out of control. We don't have visibility. On the Copilot side of it, we have the purview compliance on top of it. We can really put policies and procedures to make sure the AI tools are being used properly in the organization. I will give this to Chris again, just to kind of talk through some of the planning things.
Thanks. Yeah, and what are the key strategies here with the E5 health check kind of process and idea around some of the pillars that we've been discussing with the licensing is to really take a thorough look at kind of these main areas. So really thinking about the foundational aspects of identity and security, setting those baselines, having those more of a blanket approach, right, across all users in an organization to have those baseline capabilities, but really wraps around the productivity side as well. So a lot of your data is going to be contained in Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange Online, the rest of the productivity suite within Microsoft 365. And then also, more newer AI capabilities like Copilot. So understanding really, the ROI on the use cases here with Copilot. So, it's much more than summarizing an email. We get into the agentic capabilities, but really where you can have, productivity increases within your environment to first kind of understand the use cases around AI and then start to have users, implement those. So, and at the same time, having data and security compliance controls around AI is another key topic here. So we can kind of see how all these different capabilities, including how we looked at during, the health check process of where there's overlap and third-party tooling, how that really becomes part of the strategic way to evaluate everything. So what we put together is a case study. So Sad, if you want to move it forward here.
Perfect. Yeah, we have one more thing before case study real quick. So yeah, M365 maps. If you all do not know about this already, this is going to become your new best friend. So M365 Maps is developed by Aaron, who works over at Microsoft. Huge kudos to Aaron for putting this together. This is a lifesaver. So if you have to just get started to understand different components inside of a Microsoft license, visit this website, bookmark this website. It's going to give you a drill down by different license types, as you can see in the screenshot over here, different category in that business license portfolio. There's a couple of things I have called out on the side here. Is it can obviously give you the breakdown of what components are included in the different license types. It can do a side-by-side comparison of licenses, right? So E3 versus E5, it will show you all the differences, really, really helping you to understand what's really what you're getting out of it. Uh, Feature matrix is another one. So if you don't know what license the feature include has, that you're looking for, just search for the feature and it'll show you all the licenses that includes that feature. Lastly, the product name changes. There is a section on this website that is kept up to date with all the changes that are happening in the Microsoft. I mean, there is a ton of changes that happens on different naming things. Things get rebranded, renamed. Uh, it's kind of confusing as is, and you throw the name changes on top of it, it becomes kind of a little bit of nightmare to track. So visit this website, bookmark this website, and again, huge thanks to Aaron for putting this together. And then with that, we're going to go through a case study that we talked about, uh, uh, and then I'll kind of give it to Chris to kind of get started with us.
Thanks. Yeah, and there's no shame on my part in using the M365 Maps website. I like to think I'm pretty good at licensing and remembering all the plans, but it's an amazing resource that I use every day. So it's fantastic work by Aaron in that case. So what we wanted to talk through is kind of a real world use case here that we commonly run across, almost on a daily basis. So we have an organization that's around 2,500 employees. They're currently licensed for M365 E3. If we recall, that's a combination of three main kind of pillars of capabilities. You have Office 365 E3, EMS E3, and then Windows 10 licensing as well. So from a security standpoint, we look at identity and the various pillars across here. So I mentioned kind of in my intro, we hear the term zero trust a lot, right? And I like to think of zero trust around these pillars. It's not just identity. It's not just one of these that means zero trust. It's a really good way to go through this E5 health check exercise by identifying these pillars and then the tools that you're using within them. So in this organization, having EMS E3, they have Entra ID P1. So they have base conditional access and MFA capabilities. They don't have the advanced risk-based components. And they're also using third-party AD tools on the Active Directory protection side. If we think about devices, what we commonly run into is Microsoft Config Manager or SCCM for device management for Windows PCs and servers as well. So what goes along with that is this organization has their Windows operating system licensed via traditional volume licensing. And then also MDM for iOS and Android is a third-party solution. So that could be Mobile Iron or Mass 360 or other solutions, and not Intune in this case. So with data security, using a third-party endpoint solution, only have the manual labeling capabilities that I was mentioning, and then kind of base DLP capabilities. So with their current licensing, they wouldn't have endpoint DLP directly related to that. And then from a threat protection standpoint, again, we think across those pillars, and in this case, endpoint protection and EDR is from a third-party tooling perspective or vendor. Identity protection that was mentioned around Active Directory previously is also third-party, and then also has third-party email filtering and CASB capabilities. So really the entire security stack is third-party vendors. And then Sat, I'll hand it back to you here for the digital workplace pieces.
Sure. Yeah. So this client was interesting, right? So there's a ton of third-party products, and then same story continued with the digital workplace. They had a legacy aging phone system on site that was out of support, and even the hardware was end of life. They had literally components purchased off of eBay sitting in the data center just in case something goes wrong, right? Because this manufacturers is not even making the components anymore. They had a Zoom for video calls. They had a third party for large town halls. The hardware was incompatible, and they had a different call center solution that didn't really blend with their voice platform. The contact center people weren't able to do easy transfers to the phone system users, and same with the other way around. Lack of capability. Not having some of these edge cases that everybody's doing these days with the omnichannel contact center. So pain points, just to kind of summarize, like it was a nightmare. No end-to-end encryption. There was a huge gap in security, lack of accountability, and just a operational nightmare to keep everything up and running. And then if something goes wrong, it was always a challenge to find the right people who could actually take care of things and bring things back online. So now we're going to talk about the future state, like what we ended up doing for them and what the new picture looks like. And I'll hand it over to Chris to start.
Yeah, and from the previous slide, when I was mentioning the various pillars, where we started to look at, during our health check process is, where's their overlap, right, with that third-party tooling? Where's that cost takeout component? So really going across the various pillars, we talked about identities. So the organization started to look at, M365 E5 capabilities, and then even some of the add-on capabilities or the suite capabilities as well for very specific use cases. But in this case, we're able to get risk-based conditional access components enabled through the P2 features on the identity side, and also privileged identity management for admins. So that gives you just in time, just enough access from an admin role perspective versus having static admins. Also allowed us to adopt some newer capabilities around automation, specifically with Entra Suite, so that joiner, mover, leaver automation scenarios that can help you essentially interface your identity lifecycle workflow with your HRIS system to, say, Active Directory, to Entra ID, to other identity systems, and really put automation around those components. And then from a device and endpoint management perspective, having System Center Config Manager allows you to naturally go into Intune management, which there's kind of two paths there, which is co-management with System Center, or possibly looking at fully enrolled into Intune, and also using something like Autopilot. So Autopilot gives the organization the ability to provision devices from the user's perspective, potentially even without any IT support or any IT interaction in that case. So user can log into their Windows 11 device, and the device essentially provisions itself, has all the security policies, BitLocker enforced, everything that kind of used to take, like a PC Depot scenario or your internal IT teams to be able to deploy those capabilities. So a lot of great enhancements on the device management side, and then rolling the iOS and Android devices into an app protection only in this case, where you have containerized data on the mobile devices. And then from the security and compliance side, or specifically the compliance side with Microsoft Purview, we moved from a manual labeling to auto labeling capabilities. So being able to label within the client, and then also on the service side, and also replacing third-party tools like Endpoint DLP with Purview Endpoint DLP, and the rest of the Defender stack in E5 as well, to help address security and compliance. So we can see this as a really good example of how you can address potential overlap in your tooling, how you can identify across these pillars where that overlap is, how they map to kind of the previous slide that we had with the details on the various vendors mapping to the tooling, and ultimately come out with a consolidated approach here that's represented within this organization around security and compliance. So.
So continuing the same enhancements into some of the digital workplace, right? So now with the E5 and Microsoft Teams, we were able to also replace their legacy phone systems and the call center third-party tools with the built-in Microsoft voice applications. We were able to implement a lot of automated call routing, call queues. Users had now ability to use soft phone, mobile app for Android and iOS, following the security controls that Chris talked about in terms of containerizing the data. Uh, Not only that, we were also able to implement some of the purview compliance on top of the teams, right? So that goes across anything, but specifically over here, we were able to create some policies about communication compliance policies around specific words, classifiers, things like that. The meeting rooms were enhanced to run Microsoft Teams meeting systems, native experience for users. They were able to take advantage of capabilities like proximity join. They were able to do Teams casting inside of the Teams room, eliminating, you know, wires and things like that. So it became really, really easy. We also installed Teams panel outside of the Teams conference room that showed the meeting was occupied, or if somebody had to just walk up and ad hoc reserve a room, they had all these advanced capabilities now. Teams Premium was also deployed, part of it, to a subset of users who needed more of who were interfacing more with external parties, branded meeting, end-to-end encryption. The AI recap was a big one. Also, we started doing Copilot. So we did a handful of vision and value workshops around Copilot on how to adapt it, some of the AI readiness component, right? Because a lot of the times there is organizations have oversharing, there is chaos in terms of data governance, things like that. So just to kind of get this organization ready for adopting AI. So it really, really set them in a very good spot. A lot of native tools, and then to Chris's point, a lot of those security components, the XDR, it started to give them a single pane of glass where they could look at across everything, right? That's one of the benefits when we do this technology consolidation, that now we are able to see everything through one lens and identify and alert on risks. So just to call out some key benefits from this case study is obviously we did a true unified platform instead of many disjointed solutions. We have improved security and advanced risk detection and mitigation controls now. Fewer vendors, better license, better ROI. So instead of having 10 different licenses, now you have 3, but you are maximizing the capabilities from that. Users were happy. They didn't have to do too much of the context switching in terms of their day-to-day activities. They were able to do most of their work in the Microsoft Teams instance, or some other Microsoft client endpoint interface, right? So it really reduced the friction from an end user perspective. And we also overlaid a lot of user adoption services just to make sure users were actually using the tools that we wanted them to be using the tools as, right? So that means training, lunch and learns, one pagers, recorded sessions, things like that. And then overall, it simplified the IT, right? Like we already have too much things to kind of, manage. This was able to simplify the overall architecture, reduce multiple redundant technology, and then just consistent experience, not only for users, but also for the IT admins. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about takeaways, and then I think after that, we'll be close to wrap this up. Take it away, Chris.
Thanks. Yeah, a couple key takeaways here that we hopefully have shown throughout the presentation are really thinking about total cost of ownership, right? So we saw that even in the exact example that we were able to retire potentially 5 to 7 different products from a duplicate standpoint, where there's potentially redundancy, overlap that we were mentioning. It's also just overall return on investment. Could be on the security side, could be on the productivity side. There's definitely a strong aspect of that. And really just understanding some of the security and compliance capabilities you can get by consolidating. So really increasing your security posture, having higher level of incident response capabilities by having a consolidated solution, which really leads to the operational efficiency component as well. So.
Excellent. So what we want to leave you all with is how we can help, right? So we are doing a lot of activities with different clients, whether you are new to Microsoft 365 or you've been using 365 for a while, there is always areas of improvement. So what we are offering is a 365 roadmap and advisory type services. Even if everything you think is right, we can still do an assessment of your environment and give you some of these efficiencies and improvement advisory pointers to take advantage more of your 365 licenses. Or if you are on E3, you're having to use a bunch of different add-ons, it's not really working out and you're still missing features, we can do that road mapping for you so you are taking the most advantage out of your 365 investments. In addition to that, we have additional managed services around SOC with the XDR detection and response services. We have the whole information protection governance offering around Purview to make sure your environment is rock solid in terms of security and compliance perspective. And then we also are doing a lot of Teams phone implementation using Microsoft Calling Plan is obviously an option. We have our own direct routing, which is more of a session-based voice delivery, makes the whole service very, very cost effective. And then we have add-on services like SMS for Teams. We can do analog integration, third-party integration. We can do SIP trunking. We can do bring your own carriers. There is a plenty of options to talk about. So we would love the opportunity to discuss some of those. If you are stuck in an old meeting space technology, we can help design, refresh it to Microsoft Teams, in addition for it to be compatible with third-party systems like Zooms or WebAccess or anything else that you may want interface with. AI and Copilot, very, very hot topic right now. So if you are somebody who is considering AI but don't know where to start, we can help with the AI readiness and jumpstart programs just to give you a good understanding of what the capabilities are, how to best prepare your environment in terms of governance and readiness to make sure we don't expose anything you shouldn't with introduction of these AI technologies, right? And same thing with Copilot. So if you're looking into Copilot, there are some groundworks to be done around Copilot to make sure it's doing what you want it to do, and then also how to use it. So we have various adoption type sessions and offerings we can give it to you to make sure you're getting most out of it. So just a couple of things to be mindful of on how we can help. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact me or Chris here. We have our email address here, but Chris and I had a lot of fun putting this content together for you all. So we hope you enjoyed this session. And if there's any question, feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, we will see you all in the next one. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, everyone.